Welcome back to Humane Architecture here on Think Tech Hawaii. This happens to be our 283rd show, I believe. And thank you, Michael, for bringing up which accumulated viewer you are. Thank you for that. So we are in the 18th episode today of our Boston Behnisch Booster with Matt Noblett and DeSoto Brown. And we're going to talk about architecture that cares about solar and social. Welcome back, guys, to volume 18. It's been too long because it was 2 weeks since we last met, but we remember, and a couple of things have happened that we want to point out here on this first slide here. When I was still in Munich, around a little before that, we were hosting the World Security Conference. We had our Vice President Kamala Harris with us. We had our self-educated building culture expert Ursula von der Leyen with us as well in the capacity of being the president of the European Commission. So lots of presidents there. And we were saying we wish they would have been going down into the Trader Vic's, which is the tiki bar down there, dating back to 1972. And you were just running across news, DeSoto, that it had, we have to say, unfortunately now, tragically, a sibling from that same year. Where is, or we have to say, was that?
Well, actually, it wasn't from the same year. It was from 1964, and it was located in a Hilton hotel in London, England. And unfortunately, its lease expired on December 31st of 2022, and it was closed, and it was completely stripped of everything. And I don't know what's going to go into it. They did keep, I am told, a number of the props or the carvings or the interesting Polynesian pop items, but they didn't keep everything. And so it is sad to me and to you that we have lost one of those few remaining bars. There are newer ones, but the older ones are very few and far between today.
Yeah, and that is also true for us here in Hawaii, where supposedly people in the world think this is where the epicenter of tiki is. Not so much anymore, but we luckily at least have the amalgamation of it, which is La Mariana, which is at the big picture there at the bottom left. And I took our fellow tropic here, Socrates Bratakos, who's our assistant fire chief for the Honolulu Fire Department and responsible for fire prevention before you even have to put it out. So, and Socrates reminds us of, especially in this show, we will continue to talk about that it's, not anymore. It's been, the times of the master builder, the Baumeister, who knew everything by her or himself, are long over. And these days it's about knowing who knows. And we want to recognize these people. And Socrates is certainly one of them. So the next slide is quickly doing one addition that I forgot to say at a show I did with Jay. Well, that is another story. No, that's another show as well. But this is the one we were throwing in instead, DeSoto, last week, because talking presidents, another president is getting towards its end, at least on this earth here, and that is Jimmy Carter. So we did a show in thanking him while he's still alive. And the last show, we forgot to say that when this Uncle C here, when we were on the Big Island, says, hey, yeah, Jimmy was building here, Habitat for Humanity. And the building we are departing from, we forgot to say, is the Mauna Lani by our mid-century modern masters, Killingsworth, that one by Larry Stricker. And we have the one by our friend Ron, who is the one at the bottom right. But the two left ones and the columns one, I want to invite you guys and everyone else to think about zeitgeist. So what's the nature and the soul of the times? And I was thinking about 77 again when Jimmy took office. And that was the year when my dad built, which we've been talking about with Ron and you, built a house for his stepdad. And I remember that he was a big fan of Franz Josef Strauss, who wasn't the person who would get a young person, at least not me, excited. He's a very reactionary, kind of tough, arguable guy who was the governor of Bavaria for these critical years. There, he even made it on the title page of the Time magazine, which we see in the middle there. But my father, thanks Günther, was able to resist that temptation of even what the client's political orientation was, and he was building him a house very much in the Jimmy style. So we want to keep that in mind, and that is the same true for the Monalani and the Halikolani, because they were already under Reagan regime by that time, although at the very beginning, and they were resisting that. And Ron was kind to show this to the emerging generation, which we see at the bottom right is our field trip a few days ago on Monday, where Ron on Zoom from his Long Beach, California, was getting the young folks excited about easy breeziness. And next slide. As Ron had demonstrated this to the max in his Halikolani, where here the hotel lobby, both the pedestrian and the vehicular one are absolutely easy breezy. And you can feel everything in there. You know, I said to DeSoto, he once said in his humble way, well, things that they put in there are decoration, but I went through again, I said they're performative things. It's performative decor because the plants, their leaves swing in the wind, so they make you aware of that. The reflecting pools, the water surface has been moved by the wind. You find that the curtains, which the interior designer did, but they are not just there to look pretty and make it feel homey, that as well, but the wind is getting picked up in them and they move. And last but not at all least, talking our consultants on the projects, Matt, have you ever had a lighting designer that you guys worked with who made it possible for you to feel the wind? Because there are these little chains in the lighting fixtures and they also move in the wind. And how awesome is that? And you see this, how awesome it is, because, I mean, this is a field trip. Normally the students, at least in the past, I never cared, but they would be like circled around you, right? And pay attention to who's presenting to them. But look at their taking advantage of the place, and they had Ron on their phones on Zoom in front of them, so they were listening what he told them, but they were practicing, right, and feeling, experiencing what he told them. So speaking about the elements and the winds, that gets us back to your project that you continue to explain us in detail, where you thought you would be in the Harvard Engineering Building that you designed, but to give another lecture there, by the way, giving lectures and educating people, but it ended earlier, so you're back in the office. And to go to the next slide, which we had already seen, but we want to dwell a little bit more on it and also share that we were able to have our meeting with Thomas Auer from TUM, which was great, and hopefully there will be more. So that's on the top left. Okay. Talk about the diagrams again. And I just want to upfront point out, which we have done before, that you guys work very multimedia-like. And although you might think, and this is, Thomas's core competence, to model things also with software and energy modeling with all the tools. But you guys are also always still using the hand as the most intimate and direct tool. Because, again, with the elements, it's not rocket science, right? We all know about it, unless we want to check out and go in artificially air-conditioned spaces. Then we can, hopefully not with a good feeling, forget about it. But otherwise, we know about it because whenever a shower comes through, we might open an umbrella, right? And things like that. When the sun is too harsh, we put sunglasses on, all these things. So I think this is really important from my point of view, the educator part of me, that you pushing these buttons is really only for people who know how to push these buttons. And some of these energy software modeling things, I always say to the emerging generation, can I trust that? But what I can trust is their sketches, because they come from them, they come from their heart. And the hand being the most direct connection to the brain. So that's what I wanted to say up front. But these are your drawings, so you tell us what made you do them.
These actually are relatively early drawings of an idea that we had going back really some years, I think, because I mean, I think, as you know, Martin, the notion of having shading on the outside of the building, so stopping the sun before it hits the glass, is kind of a fundamental aspect of designing buildings that that are not reliant on air conditioning. And you know, in Germany and elsewhere in Europe, where really where air conditioning is not nearly as prevalent as it is here, it's absolutely necessary to have these things, because that's the difference between being comfortable inside the building and being uncomfortable. So oftentimes that's done with an operable kind of shade, a device that's bolted to the outside of the building and can go up and down and pivot to adjust to the multiple angles that the sun can take over the course of the day and the year. And we got interested in the idea to see, you know, if we could take the kind of technology that exists in the motors and all the moving parts on the outside of the building and kind of pack that back into the design process, in a sense. I mean, this is partly based on our experience with American clients who don't like motorized, highly mechanized, and highly maintenance intensive building elements. So we thought, well, maybe we could design something that would be as flexible as a moving system to react to all these different sun positions, but do it with a completely fixed shading device. And it's not, you could do it sort of longhand. I mean, you could actually work this out without computers, but it's much more precise and much more thorough if you actually take the entire solar dome and sort of test it, you know, with multiple iterations over the entire year. So that's kind of what this represents, is optimizing shading, these little shading elements, which are about a meter square, over all four sides of the building, so northeast, southwest, so that each one has the right shape according to the orientation of the building facade.
Yeah,
and can I just also add too that I think a lot of people may not realize this, and it seems incredibly intuitive, but a lot of people don't think about it. Not only does the sun move through the sky every single day on a particular path, but that path changes every day throughout the year because the Earth changes its position. So it isn't just that you plan for one day and you've planned for the whole year. You have to plan for the entire year, 365 days, because the sun is in a different position every single day. And again, we all know that intuitively, as you said, Martin, we all understand shading. We all understand that concept, but it's difficult to put it into practice if you've never thought about it the way, for example, I have not ever thought about it because I've never designed something like this.
Yeah. And there's the little book up there in turquoise color that we're supposed to write together, DeSoto, right?
Yes.
So, and we put the IBM building in. We had some discussions because of our criteria self-assigned together with Don Hibbert, that we want to only put buildings in there who are climatically and culturally complicit with the natural environment. And Don was saying, well, there's still a lot of sun, getting to it. Is it really qualifying? And it is hermetic behind, but we argued that. And we said, as we did last week in the show or 2 weeks ago, that we said, it is really, trying hard, and it's ambitions, and it's also doing it in several, if you really eco-teched it or whatever software you do, it's doing it. But the other project that has been a no-brainer, because it's one of our favorite ones, DeSoto, the Ala Moana building, basically, is a victim of what Matthew explained, that operable systems need to be maintained. We also watched in the lobby of Ron's Halekulani. They have, that's at the bottom right picture, when you recall one slide ago, Michael. Yeah, thanks for bringing it back. When you see that opening up to that courtyard there, for the very stormy and windy and rainy weather we have right now, there's very delicate roll-down shades out of PVC. And they're very elegantly, they're run on cables, very elegantly integrated. But when the wind blows, that thing is like a sail. And it's very spectacular because it adds this concave or convex, depending on your outside or inside thing in there. But I can only imagine how that much is wearing on the fabric, right? So it only takes so long when you need that to be replaced. And that unfortunately happened with our favorite Ala Moana building, that had sun-retractable aluminum louvers, and somewhere in these bad 90s that we had to go to school to education, Matt, there were some facility people and said, hey, greasing these all the time is kind of pain in the butt. Why don't we throw them out? And and that is now the sad and added some whimsical, not doing anything but wanting to look not too naked thing. So that's why, especially if you're talking about an institutional client, Matt, right? Which I know because I have a lot of experience with them too, public clients. They want, which we should tell them what we do, they want no maintenance. Of course, there is no such thing, but they want low maintenance. And then operable systems are really vulnerable, right? I want to transition to the next slide because one of the major things when we start to get into architecture, we always confuse. And that's one major thing I always have to remind the emerging generation, the difference between sunlight and daylight, right? You want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously people associate daylight with kind of the sun streaming through the windows, but the way we actually analyze it is generally for what we call a perfectly diffuse sky. So when we're looking at the daylighting levels that occur inside the building, it's based on the assumption of almost like a perfectly overcast day. So you have light coming from all directions consistently. And if it works in those conditions, it only gets better, but you don't rely on the actual sun position. And so what you're seeing here is this is a device in Innsbruck called an artificial sky that our lighting consultant Barton Bach built essentially to test exactly that. So this is a kind of a perfectly diffuse lighting dome that allows you then to measure lighting levels through, in this case, through this facade design that we have.
So now this is incredibly intriguing to me. So you make a smaller model of the same device of the same shading material you'd make large for the building. And that's what we're seeing here. So this is just, there's a little building and then you put miniaturized or smaller scale shades on it. And then you have that diffuse light to be able to test. That is great. So it isn't just computer rendering. There's an actual room that you light. Okay. See, that's very kind of analog rather than digital.
It is a bit analog, and it's
but good.
I mean, this is one way we do it both ways. Obviously, we test it digitally, but then also do it with real stuff. Yeah. There's another version of this that a guy named professor named Charlie Brown at the University of Oregon. He has a lab in Portland where instead of a full dome, perfectly diffuse dome, he actually created a platform that allows him to rotate it and tilt it so that instead of creating diffuse light conditions everywhere around the model, he moves the model on this little movable table and rotates it and uses just a spotlight, like a theater spotlight, to change just essentially the direction of the light and test it from different angles. So people have done different ways of we've also tested things there with him, but it's important. I think it's important to sort of test both ways, right? Because there can be the computer modeling is not it's not always perfect.
Yeah. And DeSoto, for the next slide, we asked you to what you showed us because this will point out the founding father Günther's, and this is about Dresden. But the previous slide, if you can go back, triggers my other Heimweh homesickness side because I'm half Innsbruckian because my mother is from Innsbruck and my grandmother was. And so we want to point out, so is Christian Bartenbach, more importantly here. And he's a very sort of legendary lighting engineer who has also been and is still an honorary professor where Thomas is at the TUM in Munich. And just pointing out, these guys are part of the project development. So they're not brought in after the fact. Okay, you met and your team, Michel and others had the great idea and they're supposed to then figure it out, right? No, they are an integral part of the development. I think that's very important to say, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So go to the next slide. And do you have your piece with you, DeSoto?
No, I did not bring my piece with me. Sorry, because it's too small and very breakable. But
tell us what it would have been.
I am going through things at my family home, to dispose of them. And I found 2 little cups and saucers from who knows what ancestor put away, and they are both marked Dresden on the bottom. So I sent photos to Martin yesterday saying, this is the home of your father, because I know, Martin, your father came from Dresden, and his mother as well. And he survived the terrifically horrible bombing that it took place in 1945. And so I thought, well, here's something from Dresden that came all the way to Honolulu. And so there are connections all over the place.
Yeah, the other connection is that your founding father, firm-wise, Günther Behnisch, is from Dresden too. They're both Saxonian boys, and there's paths that they crossed. And Günther Despang, because Günther Behnisch is not physically with us anymore, unfortunately, went to an event that's up there. This is the colleague architect Daniel Liebeskind, who won the Peace Prize. That's usually not given to art, not necessarily given to architects. He was actually the first architect getting that. And they were doing this around his war museum that he has been expanded and, you know, shoving this thorn through. That's kind of the way he kind of does it. And what does this have to do with us, with this next topic involving not just the engineers and the consultants, but also involve the people who make the building, the manufacturers, and the materials, the products you use or products you make if you inspire. And I said in a humorous way to my dad, I said, I'm sure Daniel will forgive you that you had once snapped an award away from him. That was the award for metal roofs and facades for the Expo train stations, where we talked about that in this show, DeSoto, that we show quote there with in the center to the right. But in a nutshell, I had that experience full blown that I was not paying enough attention to what the material inherently is, what the nature of the beast is. And the contractor allowed us to do that. And then, although there was another, of the architects of the more formalist type, not just Liebeskind, but also Gary was in our way. And I basically said we started without having any chance against Gary, so we're continuing that. And both were applying for the same award. And Liebeskind with a Jewish museum, which probably from an ethical point of view, being German background, should have gotten the award. But the jury was comprised not only of the equivalent of the AIA, the BDA, but also the roof organization of the people who make metal roofs and facades. And they just recognized the fun that we had with this project and said, no, these guys deserve to get the award and not Daniel, and not the other big shots. And this is a little tradition in this award that we were just basically following. So again, that's my reference to, again, knowing the material upfront and reaching out to the industries and to the manufacturers upfront and doing sometimes things that aren't off the shelf, because often for us in these days, right, it's easy to have all these binders in the office with all these products that already exist, right? And you grab one and you just pick that one. But that wasn't the case with us, and certainly wasn't the case with you. So that's explain this to us here.
Yeah, so once we had kind of defined the shapes of these devices, we had to wrestle with how we were going to make them. And we initially had thought about much more traditional ways of making metal kind of devices like that, right? Which would have been, say, in the US, very typically, it would have been like aluminum plate that it was cut and welded and painted or anodized or something like that. But once we started working with the manufacturer of this facade, Josef Gardner, we had in our mind these images at the top that that there might be other industrial ways of forming metal that could inform how we could do this. And at the time, I think we were thinking about things like in the middle row of diagrams, which is really more like stamping or different ways of cold forming metal. And fortunately for us, our colleagues at Gardner were able to reach out to a company not so far from Stuttgart called Edelstahlmechanik, who actually work with a technique called hydroforming, where rather than having two kind of married pieces to stamp the metal. You actually only create the negative version of the object. Then you put a lid on that mold with a stainless this kind of thin sheet of stainless steel running across the top, and then inject a liquid through the lid that basically presses the metal down into the negative form of the mold, and then you drain the water out, and then you take the piece out, and it's been basically pushed through the pressure of the water into its final shape, and then it can be trimmed and finished according to however you need it to be. But it's a rather efficient way to get very precise cold formed metal that can be produced on a kind of a large. In this case, we had about somewhere between 12 and 13,000 of these panels that had to be manufactured.
Matt, I have some questions. First of all, is the gauge of the metal that can be used with hydroforming different than the gauge that you can use with stamping? In other words, must it be thinner than what could be accommodated with stamping?
I think maybe I would put it this way: it can be thinner. I think because you have less, a different series of forces operating on it. There is still a thinness issue where pressing this deep into the very tightest corners or the most rectangular or the most angular geometry can be problematic. So there are a lot of tests that we went through to see what was the thinnest material that we could use. But and also just how fast can you do it? Does it take longer to do than conventional stamping? It actually doesn't. I mean, I don't know if we have the video or if you've ever put the video into these slides, Martin, but it actually basically you once you put the sheet of metal on and put the lid, and the lid is actually inside the machine, so it sort of rolls in on that piece of the machine that you see in the lower right hand corner that's sticking out. A door closes, you see water kind of coming out from underneath the door, and then you lift the door up and it comes out. It takes just really a matter of seconds to do the work. Yeah, it's quite fast.
And
that's
speaking
amazing.
Absolutely. And speaking of a matter of seconds, that's what we have left for today, and we will have that video up for next week, because then you will join us. What a teaser! So, all right, thank you guys for sharing more, Matt, and you being so excited about it, DeSoto, and more how that processes and progresses. We will see next week. And until then, please all stay smilingly, social, and solarly. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.